This is me reading and responding to your paper. Wow, this time with Michael Jackson in the background. That's a free gift. Okay, humans have been around since the beginning or soon after, depending on your beliefs, but it took thousands of years for the anatomy of our kind to become common knowledge. It's quite certain that people before the 13th century knew their body from the outside but had no clue about the inside. Europe had a huge influence on the discoveries of the human body, and most of the modern world today owes them a great thanks for the medical influences they've had in the medical field. Without the medical advances made in Europe, medicine so I think you need a comma there. Without the medical advances made in Europe, comma, medicine and medical examinations would not be as advanced as they are today. Okay, so one little thing I'll mention is that I know pretty much nothing about medicine in anywhere else except the United States and a little bit about Europe. So it would be, I think, unless you know a lot about that, I would always encourage you to make clear what specific thing you're looking at. Okay, and why am I? Let me get to the point. Okay, it's quite certain that people before the 13th century knew their body from the outside, but now had no clue about the inside. If you limit that to European people, again, like you might be right about that, but because it looks like, I'm guessing, you're going to just deal with the history of medical stuff in Europe, then you can make sure that you're like covered and you're definitely saying something that's for sure true. Because the way you've worded the sentence, it's like you have to know about medicine all over the world before the 13th century, and you don't have to know that. Okay, without the medical advances, here we are. From 630 to 370 BC, clinical medicine flourished in Greece. Excuse me, the Hippocratic writings written by philosopher Hippocrates contained 42 clinical cases which were not re-encountered for another 1700 years. Huh. The cases written down in Hippocrates' writing included a higher level of medicine at that time. A higher level? I don't know what that means. It included inspection, palpation, direct osculation, and the examination of urine and sputum, which is the mix of saliva and mucus coughed up from the respiratory tract, which is the result of infection or other diseases. Wow, that's cool. Towards the end of that sentence, though, I started kind of getting lost in it. Maybe you want to put that part in parentheses so that you could end your sentence at the cases written down included. Let me just jump to this part. Included in inspection, palpation, direct osculation, and the examination of urine and sputum. I might put that in parentheses. A mixture of saliva and mucus. I don't know. There's other ways you could change that, but I think you need to do something there so that, like, so much of your sentence is taken up by explaining what sputum is, and that doesn't even really matter. So I'll leave that to you. Okay, although Hippocrates had all these cases written down, the Greeks did not have an accurate knowledge of the human body, and from their knowledge, disease was caused by an imbalance of the four humors. Okay, although he wrote these cases down, they did not have an accurate knowledge of the human body. So that feels like one thought. And then new thought, from their knowledge, disease was caused by an imbalance of the four humors. Blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm. Phlegm. That's an awesome word. Okay, yeah, I think you have two thoughts there, although he blah, blah, blah. And also maybe when you start that part with their knowledge was caused from their knowledge, it kind of sounds like you're about to tell me something that's true. And then I'm like, well, they didn't really have knowledge of that because it's not real. So, okay, developments on anatomy, pathology, and the classification of disease not began until the 13th century. Okay, going back to that date you mentioned before. Galen was the next big Greek physician after Hippocrates. Wait, whoa, what? That throws me off a little bit because I'm like back with the Greeks, and then I'm with the Greeks, and then you're sending me to the 13th century, and then we're right away coming back to the ancient Greeks. So I think a little organization A little organization tweaking there would be helpful. Okay. He wrote 22 volumes containing the anatomy from pigs and monkeys. Although much of his work was incorrect. Oh boy. I mean, pigs I get, because, like, presumably they ate pigs, but monkeys? That kind of worries me. Okay. Although much of his work was incorrect, it was accepted until the time of Vesalius, whatever. Vesalius found it accurate in modern anatomy in 1543 and wrote De Humanis, Decor something, meaning on the structure of the human body. His book, Wawa, I didn't give out his book, was based on his own personal dissection of the human body. Okay, so it's seeming to me like we had this paragraph starts off suggesting it's going to talk about ancient Greece, and then I think it really makes sense, although some of this is, maybe my personal taste, but I think it would make a lot of sense to start a new paragraph with Vesalius to make it clear to your reader that you've done a huge jump in time, right? 1543. Your part of your paragraph isn't somewhere around like 400 years BC, and now we've jumped almost 2,000 years. So I would make that a new paragraph. Vesalius was only capable of doing these dissections since human dissection began in the 13th century, and any time before it was very rare. It began, or it was, people wrote down things about it. I mean, I bet some people did, cut some things up and take a look. But I guess you just say very rare, which sounds fair. The only people who knew about human anatomy were the Egyptians before the 13th century because the embalming process. Oh my God, that makes so much sense. Okay, but when we're going to the Egyptians, then I'm like, well, why didn't we talk about the Egyptians first? Like, you might have a good reason for discussing these things out of chronological order, but if you don't, I think that's just confusing. This is why it is assumed that dissection of human bodies from the purpose of getting knowledge of human anatomy originated in Alexandria, Egypt. Due to the start in Alexandria, that is where human dissection was confined. And Galen, another physician, said it was the only place where human anatomy could be learned. Because it started in Alexandria, it was confined to Alexandria? I don't think that's what you mean. Sorry. Dings. Okay. But after the death of two important physicians in Alexandria, this guy and that guy, human dissection was forgotten in Alexandria and most of Greece. The disappearance of human dissections could have been attributed to a new medical idea founded by the school of these people and his followers. This guy and his followers believed that human dissection had no scientific utility in teaching anatomy, and that desired clinical results could be found using non-invasive and random observation. Why did they think that? Maybe you know, maybe you don't. Okay, so throughout the generations fell... All right, there's something there that needs fixing. So throughout the generations fell away from human dissection, and it became blasphemous and was declared illegal. For centuries, the European world valued the holiness of the church more than scientific findings. Definitely. It wasn't until the 14th century that human dissections were brought back legally for the teaching of anatomy in Bologna, Italy. I'm guessing because that was the first university in Europe, which I wouldn't have known, except I did a little research for a class. Okay, so like I said, I think the Egyptian stuff, it seems like you need to go in chronological order. I mean, this is about history. It's not about organized around ideas and seeing different places. It's not organized around ideas. It's organized in chronological order because it's so much about how things changed and developed, right? So I think you need a separate paragraph that will just be about each movement, each place, each time. Yeah. Okay, although the church did not forbid human dissection after it began again, they did out in play several decrees, such as prohibitions for clerics involving themselves in the study of physical nature. They did, I don't know what that means. But that's the reason I read these out loud. It's because I do this with my own writing too. And when I read my own writing, frequently I come to things and I'm like, what was I trying to say here? Reading out loud It's very helpful to me anyway. Okay. In 1213, the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II issued an order that a human dissection would occur at least once every 5 years for anatomical studies, and attendance was mandatory for everyone practicing medicine and surgery. How interesting. This step was huge toward the revival of human dissection in the science world, and later in the 13th century, it was found that human anatomy could only be taught by the dissection of a body. It was found, I would say, like, later in this 13th century, it was believed. Yeah, because I mean, you definitely could teach it. If this happened again, like even dissecting frogs, like we have computer programs, blah blah blah. Okay. At the end of the 13th century, the University of Bologna came to be the most popular university for the studies of medicine, and maybe the only one. I don't know. Although these events led up to the first fully legal and educational human dissection following the death of those people. All of the events led to the first fully legal and educational human dissection following the death of these people. Okay. The dissection was performed on a female, an executed criminal, and was on public display, marking the return of dissections in an educational setting to teach human anatomy. Wow. No comment. Okay, after the 1400s, human anatomy was no longer associated with just education. It was becoming a new norm for the world. Human anatomy became an art form, if you will. Oh, okay, that's what you're saying. Famous artist Leonardo da Vinci carried out his own dissections on animals as well as humans and made sketches during the dissections as an anatomical text for himself. After this artist and anatomist began working together, after this artists and anatomists began working together to investigate the body during dissections. Yeah, I needed an S on that, artist. They produced images and sketches from a medical point of view with the twist of an artist's vision. Anatomy then after was able to be thoughts from paintings, sculptures, and many printed forms or work. There's another sentence I will just leave to you to take apart and put back together. Okay, as one can see, there's so much history behind human dissection and the process of education on human anatomy. The modern world owes a great thanks to the great philosophers of Greece and Alexandria, where it all started. The philosophers in their time set up the medicine world from the smallest invention of the stethoscope all the way to knowing the intricate parts of the body. The short amount of history included in this writing does not do the history of human dissection and anatomy justice. The information that was just displayed does not even begin to cover the many philosophies, novels, cities, universities, and more that led to the beginnings of medical examination of bodies. There is so much more to learn from this history. I like that way of ending it. You're the one who ended your paper that way with just kind of the, hey, let me remind you, this is way bigger than what I got into here. Okay, I hope some of that was helpful, and thanks for your paper. I learned something.